these clouds create the purest rain on earth, it falls on a remote tropical island in search of nature's best filter. Ancient volcanic rock. It's not just water, it's Fiji water.
Welcome to Season 3 of the Healing Broken Families podcast. I am your host, Barbara Pointe, and each week I host conversations around divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict personalities. So if you like our content and you're listening, I invite you to like and subscribe. We'd love the love for Season 3, so please like and subscribe. And thank you to our sponsor, Fiji Water, for coming on board and sponsoring this podcast. I'm very delighted to say that today our guest is Susan Gold. Susan Gold was raised in a challenging and chaotic early family system. And she was the middle child of 5. And to fully thrive, she bravely chose to meet head on the demons of her upbringing that were continuing to repeat in her life. She's written a book. It's called Toxic Family, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. That really resonated with me because don't we all want to experience freedom as adults? And we're going to talk about that with Susan. Susan now leads retreats, webinars, workshops, and private sessions to help others drop out of outdated storylines that are no longer serving them, and programming that they also need to drop in exchange for living from the heart as authentic adults. Welcome, Susan.
Thanks for having me, Barbara. I'm so excited to be here. I've been a fan and I've listened to multiple episodes, and I really appreciate what you're doing for our community.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm honored to receive that compliment, and I'm excited to talk to you. We've already chatted a little bit, and I thought we might start with your book because it seems important. It seems really relevant for our audience. And when we were chatting earlier, we even described your book as an activation. So can you tell us about Toxic Family and your journey towards birthing this book?
Well, thank you for asking. And first, I just want to start with the title. It wasn't my original title. It was the suggestion of my publisher. And it took a lot of bravery for me to agree to that title because they said, clearly, this is what the book is about. And to me, it felt like I was throwing my family under the bus. I think my title was Magical Illumination because I've done a lot of work around my family of origin issues, and I've done so much healing, and I hold no malice. I've come, full circle, and I appreciate the roles that my family members played. It was damaged and abused children raising damaged and abused children. And it goes way back in the lineage. So I'm not a victim. I did suffer, but I see it as all part of my plan to come in for the evolution of my soul. And now I see it to be a benefit to others. But the book was a long process. I think in 2007, I had an Irish seer tell me, you have a book to write. And I just kind of went, oh yeah, I don't need to do that. A PR tool, yuck. And then it kept repeating, you have a book to write, you have a book to write. So finally, someone said, you have 3 books to write. So I thought, I better nip it in the bud before it gets too much. And I started writing probably about 3 years ago. And initially I sat down like a bulldozer, 15 minutes in front of that computer screen, whether I had something to say or not. And it actually got me my first manuscript, but it was a really cruel and punishing way to do the exercise. And then a loving teacher suggested maybe you want to go back and rewrite it from little Susie's point of view, that little beautiful one inside your heart that's been through this entire experience with you. And that made all the difference in the world. I feel more connected to the trajectory and the material and the messaging.
So what was important about you telling your story and also going into that younger little Susie perspective? Like, because often I say it's so important for us to tell our story, and then in modern day it almost becomes like a cliche, but I was saying that to a woman some time ago, you should tell your story. And then when I was going to sleep, I heard this say, I heard in my head, tell your story, heal yourself, and you heal the world. So was it like, what was your journey writing your story? Like, did you heal yourself? Like, what happened for you in those moments going back to little Susie?
Well, I want to say that just the exercise of writing this has really given me profound respect for who I am as a human being on this earth. And I feel like one of the masterful lessons that I've been assigned is to really come to understand my power. And I think it's in one of the later chapters when I describe a lesson my greatest guru gave me, which is my ex-husband. When I saw what I traversed in the disintegration and the dissolution of my marriage, and what I stood up to and ultimately thrived through, and to see that in black and white as the story was laid out, so many pieces, Barbara, came together and really made such sense. I have chill bumps.
I actually got chill bumps when you said that too. I got chill bumps when you said that you came to a place of profound self-respect for yourself. Because I think sometimes, it just says, when we go through abuse, we feel devalued. And that's a lonely place to be. So what's important about having that profound self-respect
I want to say that was trained out of me as a child. There was not enough love to go around, and what scraps there were highly coveted. So it was extremely competitive, it was violent, and it was chaotic. So what that left me in adulthood was a very low sense of self-esteem and self-respect, and really an understanding of who I was as myself. It was easier for me to be a chameleon and to perceive what I thought you might want from me and then create that. And totally obliterate my own needs and desires. I wasn't even in touch with them. I mean, something as simple as, do I want spaghetti or Chinese food for dinner? Like, I couldn't figure that out.
Yes, I'm sure a lot of people in our audience can relate to that. I can relate to that. Earlier we had touched on at when we make the shift of becoming empowered or finding that deep self-respect, that oftentimes we're also very intuitive in our feelings. Like, did you shift as a chameleon to be safe in that chaotic environment?
Well, thank you for asking that insightful question, Barbara, because I really had so much intuition, and I was also quite telepathic. I could read thoughts clearly, and I thought everybody could do that. But there came a point early on when that got me into trouble. Physical, emotional, spiritual. It just caused too many problems, and I shut it down tight, and it stayed wrapped tightly well into my adulthood, probably until I started meditating. And also I got clean. I got clean when I was 25 years old. Drinking was something that was totally acceptable in my household. And I think I was 25 when I realized there were some red flags. So I had to put that down and get clean, and then get quiet within myself. And it's taken a long time for that trust to come back and feeling safe with my intuitive knowing. And I can also hear thoughts when I want to. I'm not doing it right now. Don't worry.
Oh, I like where this is going, but I want to invite you to back up just a little bit, because I also felt something when you said there just wasn't enough love to go around in your family, and it was like there just wasn't enough love, and I thought that was an interesting comment, because a lot of times when humans go through abuse, women, then later it just seems like there isn't enough money, or there isn't enough good men, or there isn't enough whatever it is, and we're struggling as adults. And someone was saying to me last night that love is like an infinite source. And so it's curious when you say in your chaotic family that you felt like there wasn't enough love. So like, tell me about that lack.
It was a very competitive environment. There were 5 children being raised by 2 pseudo adults. There wasn't a lot of trust, and there was very little compassion. Boundaries were crossed, and there was a lot of mind fluffing going on. My parents were brilliant. My father is an astrophysicist and academic, and my mother is equally as brilliant. But love meant manipulation. It meant war. It meant compromise. It meant smothering. It was passive aggressive. It was me against you. It was come closer, get away.
Awesome. So when you internalize those kind of emotions, like those kind of experiences, like come here, get away, how did that play out in your adulthood? Because you've already said that you did some drinking and then you got clean, and it seems like it might be a good time to go to a narcissistic relationship you had. You mentioned it already, and a lot of women will describe their ex-husband as, you know, a narcissist or an asshole or something, but not the greatest guru I've ever had. So, and so that sounds curious to me as well.
Well, I think, you know, my father was a Peter Pan who was cheating almost full on since the honeymoon. So that's what I saw, and I saw it clearly. As a young child, like I could see right through it. So I had little trust, but no self-esteem, and wanted to be approved of and acknowledged, especially by my father. So I found myself repeating that in adulthood, finding the lowest hanging fruit, the man child that needed to be propped up. So repeatedly in relationships, I would be carrying the load and thinking that there was something wrong with me. There was another strong message that my father had given me, that my tastes were too expensive and no one would want me, meaning a partner. And I literally played that out. So, you know, one of my first loves as an adult was an alcoholic. And I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. And, I almost grounded myself. And ultimately, I moved to LA and I thought it was my career, but it was really to meet my husband. And he was my greatest guru. He did reflect back to me, ultimately, my power. And I know many women don't see it that way, but I have to look at it that way. I carried so many men on my back who were double my weight. And I needed to stop doing it or I was going to collapse. So he ultimately gave me a gift that he was so flagrant. There was no way I could not see it. And I had to step up to it. I tried everything I could to save that marriage. My last straw was a post-nuptial agreement to try to bring integrity into the relationship when it came to finances. And we got to the last point of negotiation. And I thought, we're saving our marriage. Oh, this is wonderful. Even though I knew in my heart it was like way past the expiration date, I didn't want to bust it up. Our son was 10. And I'll never forget it. He crossed his arms and his eyes went into those lizard-like slits that are so cold. And he said, I'm filing for a divorce and I'm hiring an attorney. And as he said those words, like this voice said, this is the universe doing for you what you cannot do for yourself. And it was a year living in the home that I had bought for and maintained and cared for our family. I was in a partial conversion in our garage on a mattress on the floor while he was in the master bedroom. And that served as the metaphor for the relationship. I could not turn a blind eye. I had to face that on a daily basis. And the way that I learned to divorce a narcissist was through no contact. And that in this case meant no verbal contact, no eye contact. Those week-long meditation retreats, thank goodness, I learned how to keep silence, hold silence, and no eye contact. All those endurance races I did, the marathons, the triathlons that were so grueling, I used that training to get through that process of the divorce. And within a year, and by practicing no contact and really letting go of a lot, it didn't seem fair, Barbara, but you have to drop fair when you go through this kind of thing with a narcissist. We had an agreement. I wrote him a 6-figure check and he was gone. And I didn't fight, because every time I would even go in that direction, it would flip over onto my head. And it was incredibly painful. It was excruciating and it felt so unjust. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it was a huge gift. And I see it. And I could see it in glimpses along the way.
That's really impactful what you just said. Just welcome your dog in. Quite a lot of women have to make multiple attempts to go no contact. It's not easy for us to do. And I think I've actually failed miserable at it. And it's also even more difficult if you have children. So what would you say to someone who's divorcing a narcissist and can't imagine going no contact or isn't doing very well at successfully implementing no contact?
Well, I know this is going to sound like horrible promotion, but I'd get a coach like you if I had to do it over again. I think a coach is a very valuable resource. I learned pretty quickly that my resource was not my divorce attorney. They were paid well, very well, and that they are not the source to go to for support. They're to go for legal agenda, period. And not many understand the process of divorcing who you think is a narcissist. So I do want to say that. And then I did get help. I did do some therapy work that had nothing to do with talk. Talk therapy was really helpful for me to understand my life story. But 25 years of it landed me square back to where I was when I started. I feel things deeply as an empath in my body, in my cells. That's where I hold trauma, and that's where I feel. So I had to find a process that worked from the inside out and shifted my neural pathways. And I've also been blessed to take instruction when given. When I first got clean, I didn't think alcohol had anything to do with any of my issues that I was having. I couldn't understand it. My dad had a problem with it. My grandfather died of cirrhosis of the liver, but I hadn't even bought my first champagne glasses yet. So a therapist suggested I go check out my dad's alcoholism problem in meetings and what it was like for me to grow up as his child in other meetings and not drink while I was in treatment. And I took that advice, and I'm glad it did. It worked. And then I also, as I was going through this divorce, took the advice of how one successfully divorces a narcissist. You have to hold no contact or you engage repeatedly, and you don't mean to. You don't mean to. You just want to make it so this person has some kind of responsibility and brings some kind of integrity to the table, and they can't, because they're always going to be the wronged one, and you can't win with that. You can only get out, and the contact has to be minimal. It was, as far as our son, I think I had the same 5 lines, and he would send zany pages of email. And I got to the point where I'd read the first paragraph. Nope. I'd give it to a friend. If there was something in there that I had to address, they would let me know, but I wouldn't even read the emails anymore.
Mm-hmm. I hear a lot of information, as you know, on narcissism and no contact. And I have to say, I haven't ever heard anyone say no eye contact, which you did say, and I thought was pretty interesting, an interesting comment to make. No eye contact.
So when we were living in the same home, I had to make a boundary. And so I had to go cold turkey. And that's exactly what I learned on silent meditation retreats. And that's what I put into play in this circumstance. And it was hard. And there were times it just felt cruel and abusive. But I had to do it for my own safety after I understood the dynamic. And I want to say now it felt like forever. It was 1 year door to door. And the custody agreement was 50-50. And I didn't want that. I would have fought him on custody too, but it was suggested that I may not want to do that. And the agreement was 50-50, but I had my son almost 24/7. And by the end, I did have my son 24/7, because that's generally what happens.
Yeah, really good hidden golden nugget they came out with no eye contact. And we don't have to explain fully what that is, but I will say that when I was going through my very long divorce, at some point I discovered not making eye contact. And it literally changed the game for me. And what it did was it took power away from them. I just stopped being hypnotized, victimized, mesmerized. It was powerful. Once it took me like 4 years to figure that out. But then I was like back in my power once I stopped making eye contact. So
it doesn't seem to make sense, right? I mean, when he first announced he was filing for divorce and we were living, I was doing his laundry. Like for 2 months, I was doing his, and then I'm like, what am I doing his laundry? What am I feeding this guy for? He's suing me. He's suing you. He's trying to take the home you bought away from your son. Okay, stop. Yeah, and I have a cousin. She also went through a divorce from a narcissist after I did. And my uncle, her father, who my ex actually turned against me, which was painful, but was part of the process, said to her, do whatever Susan did. It worked.
Wow, that's really, really helpful. And what a metaphor, what a literal metaphor, manifested in real life. A mattress in the garage that was a powerful visual image that you put out there. What advice might you have, or healing words might you have for women trying to like heal from an experience like that?
So it takes the time it takes. For me, I was attached at the hips in second grade, and Billy Fritz, we got married on the playground. I mean, I always had to have some kind of boy attention. I was addicted to that. And then really, honestly, I barely went without until this relationship ended. And finally I said, this is it. I'm going to get to know myself. But I put up yet again another really hard and strong boundary because I didn't trust myself. After that experience of that divorce, I did not have any trust that I could decipher a healthy relationship. I was single for 7 years, and by choice, one date during that period. It was a flashy Academy Award-winning director and Emmy-winning producer, and he had a big series out at the time, and he had all this attention, and the day of the date came, and he lived 15 minutes from me. In LA, when you live on the east side and somebody lives on the west side and you're going to the west side, yeah, you go meet them, but when they live 15 minutes away, they should come pick you up for the first date. And he didn't. So I was like, red flag. Yeah, this is not going to be it. But 7 years. And then I met someone online in an angel class. Get that. And we were friends first, and neither one of us had any urge. He had lost his beloved wife, who was diagnosed with colon cancer. And given 6 months to live, and she lived 5 years, and which was a lot attributed to the love they had for each other and the depth they went to explore alternative methods of healing. But I mean, this man, like, he loved his wife. They were like brother and sister. People that like met them said, did you just meet a couple weeks ago? No, we've been married 20 years. Like, I wanted to murder my spouse at the end of the relationship. So I didn't have any apostat for this, but ultimately we did fall in love, and I'm still looking for the shoe to drop because it's just who I am, which I'm hoping to evolve. But he has been incredibly healing as far as learning what unconditional love really looks like and feels like. And I'm just truly blessed to have the experience of him in my life.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm happy for you. That is beautiful. So where would be the best place to go now if in this conversation?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, we have touched upon so much, and I'm just so grateful I didn't have to go down the road of my celebrity, background, because I in business, I was known for attaching celebrities to brands, and I became a television producer. And so when most people read about my backstory, they just want to talk about all that, which also has interesting backstory because, again, I transformed trauma to thrive even in those stories. And there's serendipity along the way. But honestly, I'm just so grateful, Barbara, to put out this message of what I've experienced separating from narcissistic abuse. It's just such an important message, and I'm so humbled to be out on the other side like you, because a lot of us, men and women, they don't escape. They're addicted to the flow, or they don't really comprehend the dance. And I just feel really blessed to be sharing this. And it is part of the book too. And I really hope that I can get the message out to as many people as possible and help.
That's bringing me goosebumps again, because so often I get questions like, well, it's such a dark topic. It's so negative. It's so, why do you do this? Why do you do these podcasts? But you know what? It's exactly what you said. I feel it is such an important work, because humans are in this cycle, like you said, unconscious about it. And for long periods of time, years, lifetimes, sometimes we see it through family lines. And so this is really a very important message that we're talking about today. But now, one thing I discern from your background is what a capable woman you are. Like, earning money, working in LA, all of these things, but yet you were with a narcissist. And sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
The odd thing, it was a statistic that I heard, I can't really say where, but oftentimes it's very accomplished professional women that are fully capable that end up in these abusive relationships. I mean, mine is a direct tie through the bloodline. I mean, I see it. Both my maternal grandmother and my paternal grandmother said if they had to do it again, they'd never marry the partner they did. So it goes back quite a ways. But I was always determined, even through the abuse, and it started early. I mean, I can go way back, but at 4, my mother basically had a split and beat me almost to the point of unconsciousness. The room went brown and began to swirl, and I began to melt. And I was cognitive. I knew at 4 my mommy was dangerous, and it was confusing because she could be so loving, but she could switch on a dime. And then my father was always drunk, inebriated. I didn't know what a sober man really was. It took me a long time to realize, oh yeah, he always smelled of whiskey and Scope and Old Spice. And I thought that was a man to me. So all those lessons really came together in a beautiful brocade. And really even more so now with the process of writing this book and seeing the trajectory in black and white, I can see how all those puzzle pieces came together. And I'm really at the point where, yeah, I want to celebrate myself. I came in with a rough roadmap, and many of us do. But I stood up to that roadmap. Stood up and stood up and stood up, and I'm still standing.
Yeah, I have to acknowledge you. To acknowledge you for that. Yeah, you did stand up. It's very inspiring. We started this podcast talking about adults that live in freedom. I don't know if that's emotional freedom or, but somewhere along the line, we're stepping into our self-respect and into personal freedom. So I invite you to sort of share with us what that can be like. What are the possibilities in living in authentic freedom?
Well, I think the first step is to really be honest with yourself. I mean, when I took a slug from a wine jug to ask for a raise, I knew that's a red flag, something's up. And ultimately, I addressed alcoholism. And then I suffered severely with depression, and I had to step up and address that. And then I saw what narcissistic relationships were doing to my being. And I had to dissect that and say goodbye to someone that I truly loved and gave and gave and gave to make a new way for myself. All these things that I've stepped up to have been magnificent lessons to free me. And I think the most recent transformation has been the fact that I left city life. I mean, I was raised in a really small town in central Pennsylvania, and I couldn't wait to get to New York City. I mean, I ended up going to New York City. And then from New York City, I wanted to go to LA, and I went to LA. And then that small inner voice, after all this happened, and about 3 years after the divorce, I was, feeling like, okay, I'm on my feet, I have my way. I set up an amazing system for myself. I transformed that garage that was my monastery into a guest suite and rented it for half my mortgage, my insurance, and my taxes. And it had been filled floor to ceiling with vinyl and records and DVDs and posters. But it was time to go quieter. That central nervous system just couldn't dial down. It was amping up, amping up, amping up. And I'm just grateful again to have had the strength and the support to hear that voice and say, yeah, I'm going to go explore. And that's how I've been led to Montana. I live in heaven on earth. I mean, the sky is as big as they say. You see stars, you see clouds move. I'm surrounded in beautiful mountains. The landscape is incredible. I mean, when I lived in New York City, I had a little cabin in the woods in the Catskills, and it was beautiful. And I always missed it. I didn't miss New York City, but I missed that cabin in the Catskills. And now here I am living in the Catskills times 7. It's just amazing. And that's another key to the freedom. Mm-hmm. Really being willing to step up. I mean, writing that 6-figure check to my ex, that was freedom. I learned that money comes and goes. It kind of got to the point where it was like monopoly money, because I had no idea how I was going to pay that 5 figures to the attorney at the end of the month. And God forbid if I would answer that email in the middle of the night looking at their invoice. But I ended up making one of the biggest deals of my career. And it was taken care of. I just really believe we have way more power than we give ourselves credit for. And if we sit quietly and sit in belief and transform some of that fear, there's a lot of magic that happens.
Wow, that's beautiful, because sometimes, we do get so locked down in fear. What I hear you saying is, just by sitting in silence, we can access our power?
Absolutely. And we're way more powerful than we even know.
Very hopeful. Very hopeful. And quite a different frequency to live in as well.
Oh, tremendously different frequency, yeah. And I'm glad you brought up that word, because that is part of the healing, to understand frequency does have an impact. Vibration does matter. And community is a place of healing.
Very nice. Very nice. And one thing that I was gleaning in your vibration when you talked about Montana was gratitude. It seems like you're really grateful for where you live. And I was, and even grateful for your ex-spouse, because you called him your greatest guru. So how does gratitude play into making the shift from trauma to freedom?
Well, I think it's something that we can all access. I think it was Liza Minnelli that said there was always somebody she could find that had a worse circumstance than she. Not that I wish that on anybody, but I mean, I go really simple. I'm grateful for that breath I just took. I'm grateful to see my dog healthy today. I start simple and then I can expand. And it's not always my hair trigger reaction. Sometimes I can really go down low and project negatively. Like I'm a master. I can really scare myself quickly. But if I can remember that little gratitude trick, oh my goodness, like within minutes, I'm feeling so much better.
That's very important. That's very important, I think, just to anchor that in. So we can anchor gratitude in when we're actually scaring the living daylights out of ourselves.
Yeah, there's actually, I think in the book, I have a little appendix where I share exercises that have helped me from various different teachers and learning along the way. And then there's a few quick beats of like what I do in a pinch, and, like breathing in ease and blowing out fear, just walking down the street, and that'll shift me really quickly. Or putting my hand on my heart and feeling my breath, or saying, it's okay. It's okay. Just simple things like that. And they have such a profound effect.
Yeah, simple things. So I think now I feel led to ask you about self-love. Is that part of the recipe for freedom? Is that an ingredient in the recipe of freedom?
So I'm so glad you brought that up, and it's so insightful and not something that I would want to miss. So the concept of self-love really eluded me. I was more about getting from the outside to go in, and I didn't really consider the inside to go out. And self-love was something icky, sticky, and not cool. I just wanted to be a warrior. I was a tiger, not a baby. So it took me a long time to really deprogram the matrix in here that's a little wound tight, and to have respect for myself enough that I could put my hand on my heart and say, I love you.
Yes, I'm feeling that's a very profound act of self-love. Yes. It's a lot of deprogramming. You used that word a couple of times. I mean, because a lot of times we're in this for many years, or it's not like this just happened in a New York minute, pardon the pun. So I think I'm sensing the strategies in your book would be excellent for our audience. And I'm also feeling like we should give a free book away. Would you be up for that to someone?
Oh, I'd love to do that. I would love to do that. Yes. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll do a social media giveaway up for your book, Toxic Family. And if someone was wanting to get coached by you or reach out to you for a chat or find out more about Susan Gold, what's the best way to reach you?
Just go to susangold.us. So it's susangold.us. And you can reach me by email there. You can put your email in and get on my email list. And I do a little 15-minute free consult. And I do other consults just by donation, if that's helpful.
Ooh, that's very helpful. Well, I want to acknowledge you and thank you for being on the show. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Barbara. I was really looking forward to it, and it fulfilled my dream.
Aww, beautiful. Well, wishing everyone in our audience healing, consciousness. Thank you for tuning in. That's all we have time for today. Please don't be shy to like and subscribe. It keeps us going. And until next time, I'm Barbara Pointe with the Healing Broken Families podcast.
These clouds create the purest rain on earth. It falls on a remote tropical island in search of nature's best filter, ancient volcanic rock. It's not just water, it's Fiji water.